our cart detail features, all this stuff on the front end. This time, we're going to migrate our connect to MongoDB Atlas yet. I'm just going to try and make things work locally first, and then once everything works locally, then we can use the URI for the remote connection to MongoDB Atlas later. So that'll be in the next video. Okay, we have a lot to do, so let's get going on this one. All right, so we have our front end. We're going to stop our back end right now. This back end piece, the first part is I want to be able to read data from our server as opposed to using what we have right now with the repository. So really, it's a plug and play replacement is what it should be, but it doesn't always work out to be that way. Okay, let's talk about this. So we're going to just minimize the client side. I'm going to go to the server side now. We're going to go back to our config, and we're going to start going through it and checking through to make sure that we have everything that we need on the back end to take care of the things that we're going to do on the front end. And I think that's what we did last day, just to remember, or when we touched the back end, we configured everything for a JWT strategy. And we did that because we were anticipating this kind of change coming forward. We're going to migrate to an API. An API is an application programming interface. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be serving up several endpoints. That's what we're going to be doing. So all the things that we have running here on the back end, we're going to be running and serving up on the front end. Okay, so all this stuff is looking pretty good. I'm just reviewing it right now just to make sure that there's nothing that I can see that's missing. I think it all looks really good in terms of the way we've set things up and prepped. And this is why I wanted to do this prep ahead of time, because I knew it was coming. Okay. First step, the routing. The routing is going to change. It's no longer going to look at slash and then the name of our access. We're going to change the backend so it says API. Okay, and this is going to be different than what we've done in the past. Could we leave it the same? Sure, we could. We're not going to. We don't have a users thing, but we're going to change to API users anyway. And what we're going to do here is our API book list is definitely what we want on the back end. So we're going to call it, for now, we're going to call it API book list, API/book list. Okay. We don't have to do this. This gets something like a next step, but this is good practice for us. In order for us to get there. I'm also going to set up later on we're going to connect to our front end, and we're not going to do that yet, but for now we're just going to do this part. Okay, so that's the first thing, so let's just save that, and I'm going to run this. So I'm going to close this PowerShell down, and we're going to open up a new one. So again, I'm going to exit from this one. And I'm going to go with exiting from this one too. We're going to make a new one. And we're going to go into week 9. And we're in week 9, the major folder, where we're going to go on the server. And what I want to run is NodeMon right now. Right, so NodeMon is going to run this. It's going to connect to MongoDB. But this connection to MongoDB is on MongoDB Atlas. And, well, we're not going to do that, right? So that's something that we're going to have to deal with. So let's go back to MongoDB, or db.js connection here, where it says URI is equal to this big long URI. I'm going to comment it out, and I'm going to uncomment our local connection. So this way I can connect to our local DB, so save. And notice that it's not connecting because I don't have our local DB up. Let's bring it up. So on the command prompt, we're going to say mongod. And there it is. That's going to make our stuff connect locally, right? And we're going to bring this back online later when we've got everything fixed up locally, okay? So one step at a time. Because this might be a lot of changes, and going back and forth to MongoDB Atlas doesn't make any sense. Okay, so that's the first part. Next is like to run a command prompt just for Mongo. So if I want to connect to Mongo directly, and I'm going to have to do this for the orders, check the orders and so on. So I'm going to say use bookstore, and we're going to say show DBS, show databases, and we're going to say show collections, the collections of this. We have two collections, books and users, and we're going to have another one which is going to be a collection for orders, which we don't have right now. Okay, so that's kind of where we are right now. And we're going to test this extensively, and that's why we brought these two little windows up. We're not going to need them right now, but I wanted to bring it up so we have a connection to Mongo. Let's run on our local DB and see what happens right now. So if I go back up online and if I go localhost, and I want to go to 3500, we should see this, right? Not found, because it's trying to get to an API where we don't have any of these wired up for API /. In fact, if I wanted to take it back and leave it as is, if I went back to our app.js to remind you of what it's like, we would just have to remove these and change them back to what they were before. And you're going to see that, just to prove to you that things are working, if I refresh now, you're going to see we're back up and running with the Express site that we had before. It's all the stuff we had before. Okay. Again, we don't want this. We want our front end to be Angular. So instead of serving up pages, we want to serve up JSON. Okay, that's this thing we want to. So let's leave the routes the way they are. So I'm going to leave this for now. Okay, because all we care about is, can we see JSON? And in order for us to do that, we're going to start thinking about how we serve stuff up. So we're gonna start with our routing. So in routing, if you look at the index route, right now we have /home, about, products, and so on. We're never gonna have to get the home anymore. So we're not gonna have access to home or any of the getters here, other than our log out, our log in, and our log out. Okay, log out, and our log in. This part here is partly going to be operational. Okay, so let's get to that part first. And again, I'm just going to go into our index route, and what we want to do here is really we're leaving all the posts alone, but we're just commenting out all of the gets. That's the first part. So we're never going to have to get a page. Angular is going to do that for us. So this gets this one, this one. All these get requests is going to they're going to be handled on the front end by Angular, right? Login to show the login page. For now, we're going to just dim it out. And same thing with our post, our get. We don't care about registration. We're going to dim it out for now. We may have to power those back on in order for us to test registration for a bit. But for now, we'll leave them as is. And then we'll go into our register and log out. These three, we're going to leave alone, because those are going to be the same for the most part in terms of routing. All right, let's save that. So now if I go back to the page, and if I go to home, it's going to give us a 404, which is what it should do. There is no link, anymore. We've disabled it. We've commented it all out, right? Let's do the same thing for our books. So again, under book, we're going to go here and we're going to only comment out the stuff, that we don't want to see, right? So we can, we're going to be able to add a book and edit a book and delete a book. We don't have that capability right now, but we're going to be able to do this later, and it's also going to require auth, right? So we haven't done this authentication stuff, but we're going to do it. Okay. That's what's going to happen. So that's what it's looking like. Okay. And we're going to change the require auth. We're going to dim it out, and we're going to get using passport.authenticate, and we're going to use JWT for all this stuff, so it works across our platform. And so when we need to, we're going to get this stuff. But the first thing we need to do is display this book list, so that we don't care about this. This isn't really really important right now, this part, because we haven't done any of these things. Not on the Angular side. We've done things locally here, but on the Angular side, all we really want to see is the book list at this point. Let's see if we can get the book list from the back end. That's what I want. So that's that. So we're not changing many things on the book side right now. However, on the controller side, that's where things change. So let's look at the index controller. So the index controller is first. And the way the index controller works, we can dim some of this stuff out. We don't have to. And I recommend when you're first starting off and you're converting, leave the controller alone, right? Because the controller is not going to be accessing any of these things except when the route is active. So the ones we need to change are our process login page and our, so not the display login page, but the process login page has to change, like we talked about. And the way it's going to change is that the payload and the auth token is going to be in play. So notice how we have this area here where we have a res JSON and we have a return res redirect down here. We're not going to res redirect anything. What we're going to do instead is, this is in the index, right? And this is our login. So when we do our login page, and we don't have this yet, okay, but what we're going to do instead is we're going to dim this out. Oops, I don't want to delete it, just in case we want to go back and try it. I want to delete it again, or dim this out. And we're going to enable this to do. So where it says to do, we're going to enable it. So we're going to get rid of this. And we're going to take this part, and we're going to delete this. And now we're going to say, we're going to put a return statement in front of res JSON. So res JSON, what it's going to do is it's going to return or respond with a JSON object that's going to have all this stuff when we log in. So that's going to be this part. So this is conversion that we talked about before. And we already had set up the conversion for our login and log out a long time ago, ahead of time. Display register we're not going to touch because we're never going to do this. But we are going to do our process register page. And our process register page, just like our process login page, well, that's going to change. So where it says return passport authenticate, which is happening down here, okay, under our registration, right? We are so here's our passport authenticate local, right? And we have this to do, right? Where we're JSON, returning JSON if it's authenticated or not. That's all we want to do. So here we're going to dim this out. So we're going to do this. And then we're going to spark this one up. Okay, so that, and we're also going to add a return statement in front of it. So return, we want to register, we can do that here, like so. Okay, so that is our index controller. Everything else for our perform logout, again, this needs to change. What we want to do is instead of res redirect, we're going to request a logout, but then we're going to respond. And we're going to comment this part out. So we're not going to redirect anywhere. Because remember, everything's going to happen, all the redirection, the routing is going to happen on the front end. Res.json. And we're going to respond with success is true and a message that basically says the user successfully logged out. So that is the first part of our changeover. So the index controller. Notice it's still pretty good. All right, so that's that part. And let's do the backend, the book.js. Okay, the book.js controller, that's where we have quite a bit of work to do. And let's talk about this. So display book list is the first thing we want to do. So right now what we do is we render a brand new view. That's what we do. And instead of doing this, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to dim this out. So we're dimming this out. And what we're going to do instead is a one-liner actually, is res.json. It's respond with JSON, and we're going to respond with the book list. So this is what I want to test first, this book list stuff, right? Can I get the book list connecting to our Angular front end, right? This, which is basically all the data that's coming from our back end instead of coming from our dummy data. Okay, so that's the first thing. I also have some other things in here, and just to prep, we're going to dim this out. So we're going to dim this part out. Should have been a semicolon there. And what we're going to do instead is we're going to do a one-liner, res.json, and we're going to say success, the display page. And we're going to say that the message is successfully displayed the add page. Okay, we're going to not need to do this very often, but this is how it's going to be here. And process add page, we're going to do more work where, again, down in here where we do a res redirect, we're not doing the redirect. We're going to gray this out. And then what we're going to do instead is we're going to do a res.json, and we're going to send a success message that says true, and our message is going to be, guess you could probably guess it, successfully added a new book. We don't have that functionality on the front end yet, but we're going to, because we know that's coming, right? And also because I've already done it. And then this part we're going to gray out. We're not going to render anything. We're not going to render something new. We're going to, for our display edit page, we're going to do a send, again, the res JSON, where we're going to respond with a success is true, and message is going to be something like successfully displayed book to edit, right? And what we're going to do here instead is pass in a book, which is the book to edit object. That's the object that we're getting, book to edit. We're going to send that off so that way we can get the data of the book that we're looking to get when we display the edit page, okay, based on the ID that we're going to feed into this thing. The process edit page all remains equal except for the last part, so we're going to gray this out, and then we're going to do a response with a JSON object, respond with JSON, and we're going to say that success is true. The message is going to be successfully edited book. The book is going to be the book, which is going to be the updated book. Okay? So that's going to be something that we're going to respond with. Okay, so notice what we're doing. We're just converting from a redirect, or we're converting from a render. We're not rendering anything. It's not a rendering engine anymore. Our front end is going to render everything nicely for us. Our back end is just going to send signals to the front end. All right, so here we're going to do the same thing. Respond with JSON data, and we're going to say that success, true, message is going to be successfully deleted book, whatever the book is. Okay? And that, my friends, takes care of all of our API changes on the routing side, so the controller side. All right. So this is pretty good. Let's check now our front end to see any changes we have to make on the REST API part. So we're going to go into the front end. And in the front end, we have our model. So in app, we have our model folder. And in the model folder, we have this REST data source, right? Our REST data source. And let's make sure that the REST data source is configured properly to accept stuff from the backend. And we're going to change these to add API just from a configuration perspective. All right, so we'll talk about this in 2 seconds here. let's see that. So how does this work? So we're going to go to, the front end, and just checking my notes because I've done this before and just want to share it with you. So yeah, okay. Big changes, big changes. So, okay, so a couple things. Whenever we want to connect to the back end, we need to set up some options. Okay. Oh, and we forgot to, for some of the other stuff in the back end, we have to change the require auth. We haven't done that yet either. But we haven't done any kind of auth guards that we're going to have to worry about right now anyway for logging in and all that stuff, because we haven't done authentication. Not yet. All right, so we have our base URL. This is good. We are going to need eventually a user. We don't have a user model yet. And we're going to definitely need an auth token. So this is where we start thinking about JWT, helper services, and all that stuff, because we're going to have to log in eventually, right? So might as well build it in now, okay? So, but first, let's talk about our why we need JWT, because we need to get into the back end, and the back end is open right now. So for now, I mean, really at the end of the day, when we get books, right, we're going to basically just go to the book list, right, and it's going to return the books from the back end, just like we normally do. So there's no changes here that's going to have to happen. Save order, that's something that won't work right now, okay, because we don't have an orders model on the back end. That'll be done next video, okay? We don't have an orders model, we don't have anything else, but we just want to get orders from the back end right now from the book list. All right, so this should work, because look, protocol, HTTP 127.0.0.1 and port 3500, which we have, and then / that's the base URI plus book list. Once we've got this, it should route properly on the back end and feed us out some JSON. And to test this, before we even come here, if I go back to the front end, and if I type in book list, book-list, we should get this. That's our book list, right? So now we notice we have an ID, we have an array that we're getting, and that's what we're going to see, an array of book data, right? And that's coming right from our Mongo database. So notice that there is no other data that's coming in right now. We can't, we're just using the API from the back end or the Express to serve us up JSON that we can consume on the front end, which we already are set up to do. Our front end is already set up to connect with the back end. We're just doing a plug and replace. Okay, so let's test it by going to the front end, which is this part, and we're going to click on About, and we should still have this running. We click on Books. If we get everything proper, we should see this connection, but we don't. And let's inspect and see what the errors are that we're going to get. All right, so take a look at what it says here. It says access to XML HTTP request at localhost 3500 book list from origin HTTP localhost 4200 has been blocked by CORS policy. No access control allow origin header is present on the requested resource. Okay. So this is where we're going to have to make some changes. We're going to have to make some changes because we need to fire forward a header that basically says, hey, you know what? It's okay for us to access the back end, right? So let's start making this header object that we're talking about. So we want to make a header object, and we're going to call this HTTP options. HTTP options is going to be an object that is going to have headers inside of it. So we're going to say that the object has headers, which is going to be of new HTTP headers, this one, which means we have to include headers in something we import, okay? If that makes sense. the next thing is we're going to, inside of our headers, we have to specify which headers we want. Now, HTTP headers are, it's a new HTTP header object that gives certain values. So here are the headers we want to include. Okay, content type, that's a header for an object, and the content type is going to be application JSON. We want to specify that the new data we're getting back to us is JSON data. We're going to say that access control allow origin is going to be equal to star. We're going to say we're going to accept access control stuff. And we're also going to say that access control allow headers is going to be of type origin x requested with content type and accept. And what this is going to do, believe it or not, this long list of things is going to create everything we need to make this work nice. Now, I just want to make sure that this is in the right spot, and it is not. This should be not here, but actually below the base URL and above the constructor. Okay, that's where it belongs. So let's just clean up this issue. This is just an issue, a quick fix issue. We want to fix linting errors, and we want to put this one so it is aligned properly, and we should have a semicolon here. And space that in, and I think actually no, we don't. We do not have a semicolon there because that is an object that we're setting forward. Yeah, like this. Okay, so that is the header we want to attach, HTTP object. But notice it's grayed out because we haven't really attached it to anything yet. Okay, not yet. We will, but not yet. Okay, so that is the first thing. And the next thing is that we want to be able to do a couple things. We want to when we're logged in, we want to use these HTTP headers to do what we need to do. Okay, this stuff. Okay, so that's the first part. First part is we make this happen. Okay. The other part is we want to start preparing for authentication because it kind of goes hand in hand with the stuff that we're doing. Okay. So we have injectable, we have HTTP client, we have HTTP headers, we have unobservable, we have the book object. Eventually we're going to have the cart and a bunch of other stuff. But what we also want to set up is the JWT helper service that we want to set up now. Okay, so we're going to say that we're going to import by hand the JWT helper service, okay, ahead of time, from author and then angular-jwt. Okay, so notice that author angular JWT does not compute. Why? Because we haven't installed it yet. Not yet. And we need to. So we're going to go into and to show you this, by the way, if you go into your package.json file, which is inside on the client side, right? Again, there's different ones. But we're going to go to this package.json on the client side. And you're going to see that we have Fort Awesome and blah, blah, blah. But we don't have an author JWT helper service or Angular JWT anywhere. Okay. We need to include this because we're going to need it for what we're doing. Okay. Let's do it. So we're going to open up a new shell. We're going to go to client. And in client, we're going to say npm install at auth0 or auth0. That's what it is, right? Slash, and it's angular-jwt -- save. We need this as a requirement because this is something we're going to be using with Angular. We're going to connect Angular to our service, right? So that's we're going to need this one part that's been missing this entire time. Looks like everything else is in place for what we need. Okay, so that's that part. And I'm just taking a look at anything else we need here. I don't think there's anything else we need. There is also something called component that we could add in, but I'm going to take a look and see. We'll see what that does. We'll see if we need it. Okay. All right, so that is our backend. We had to set that up. So if we go back to the REST service, REST data source, we have to install our JWT helper service here. But remember that that's not, well, remember, that's not the only place we're going to need it. All right, so that's the first thing. We're also going to need an auth token. So we talked about this idea of an auth token that we're going to need. Auth token, which is going to be a string. So that's where we're going to have this bearer token that we're going to be dealing with on the front end, right? Inside of our constructor function, we're not only going to take in HTTP client or HTTP, but we're also going to include a private JWT service, just in prep, which is going to be of type JWT helper service. So that's going to connect that up. Okay. And that's the first part. So first part is, hey, we're getting the service. Our get books shouldn't change because we're basically going to say we're going to get a get request from the book. Base URL is the book list, and the book list is exactly what we should. Again, it's just like a plug and play. This part will definitely change because we don't have anything like that that does stuff. I'm also going to have a utility function called load token. I don't need it right now, but we will need it. And so we're going to have a private load token utility function that we're going to make. And load token is going to actually, when we log in to the service, we're going to have a token which is going to be stored in local storage. That's where we're going to get it. And we're going to get item from local storage that is going to be the ID item, ID token. That's what we're going to call it when we store it there. And we're going to say this.auth token is going to be equal to the token that we get from local storage. Okay. Could have done it in one step, but we're not doing that. And then we're going to say HTTP options. We're going to modify the HTTP options headers component with this.HTTP options.headers.set. And we're going to say that we're going to set the authorization to this.auth token. Okay, so that is eventually something we're going to use for authentication next week. Okay, for now, we just need to know that it's there. So we're doing our setup on the front end. The other thing is this static data source. It looks pretty good. Let's take a look at the static data source. It's injectable, and we can have get products or get books and save order. That's all good to go. There's nothing else for us to do there. We do have to make some changes to the app module. Okay, so we're going to go there in a sec. I'm just making sure that there isn't anything we need to do from a data source perspective, because from the REST data source is where we're going to log in. we're going to log out, we're going to authenticate, we're going to save our orders, we're going to do everything from the data source. Okay. Let's take a look at the app module. So the app module is the main module right here, app module.ts. And what we want to do here is use that JWT token. So let's take a look at that. So first, in here, in kind of the global space, we're going to use an export statement to export a function, a global function called JWT token getter, and which is going to return a string. And what this is going to do is we're going to return from local storage get item, and we're going to say that the ID token is something that we want to get from local storage. So that's what we're going to return from local storage. Okay, so local storage get item. I'm also going to do the following. I'm going to say that we have our imports, and we are going to have in our imports, we're going to eventually have our store and cart and checkout in here as well. But for now, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to add a token getter, which is something we're going to make available across the board, right? And we're going to do that by putting inside of our page, underneath our pages module, we're going to say that JWT module dot for root, and we're going to make a new config for this module, which is going to be the token getter, where we're going to pass in the JWT token getter. And that should complete everything we need for the JWT module to connect to our app on the front end. Okay, I'm just going to get rid of this because that's going to tell me that it doesn't like those trailing spaces and stuff. So that is the JWT module that's going to be here. Okay. I'm also going to, from auth Angular JWT, even though I'm only using the JWT module, eventually I may need the JWT helper service as well as the JWT interceptor. All right, so I need those two services in there as well. I know because I've come by this a couple of times now, and we're good to go. So that's the first part. Okay, so let's save that. And we should be still okay. So it says, let's fix this first. So again, one thing at a time. It says it compiles successfully, but then it says the error node modules auth Angular JWT lib Angular WT module.dts appears in the ng module imports of app module, but could not be resolved to an ng module class. Okay, so remember, only modules go in imports. So maybe I need to restart this thing. See if it builds. Again, this is, like I said, it's a long process. It's trial and error. We're going to see if it works, and looks okay now. Right? So that's what I'm saying. Sometimes Angular just needs to be rebuilt. That's just the way things go, right? So because we're changing the structure, the underlying structure of things. Okay. Now this doesn't mean that it's going to serve up properly by any means. So if I go back up to here and I go to books, doesn't mean that we're going to get books. We're still going to get this error. This is on the back end now. Right, so it says that book lists is on localhost 4200. We're getting an error because it says the book list failed, right? Where we're getting an HTTP error response where the HTTP headers are unknown for this. Okay, so we're going to fix this problem in our app. Okay, now to show you what's happening, we also should see on this side what's going on here. So it says book list 304, we're good to go. On my end, on the back end, we're good. On the front end, not so good, right? Doesn't like that we're going to connect this way, the way we're connecting. But we're close. We're close. Again, it should be plug and play, but I'm going to make sure that we didn't miss anything. So let's go on the product model for a second. One thing I want to do on the product, on the book model, right? So again, where we have our books on the book model, so let's just try and put in some additional things. Here's our book model. One thing I'd love to have is a toString function, so I can print out the book itself. Like I want to show the book. I don't have that right now. There's no stringification function that does it. So I'm going to make a new toString helper function that's going to basically allow me to output, return a book. And the book is going to be, by the way, it's going to be backtick book. It's going to be a template string. Add a few dashes here just to make it. We're going to name the book, which is going to be this dot name. Okay, we're going to fix this in a second. And we're also going to say that the author, which is this dot author, make sure that this backtick is actually down in here, so we can continue. And we're also going to do published, plus the year published, and then it's this dot published, followed by the price, the description and the price. But let's do the price. We'll do the description too. Description. Sometimes I want to be able to see this in the console, and I don't want to go through this later on. I'm just going to prepare this because I know we're going to need some troubleshooting in a second. And we're going to do the price. So and we're going to say that this is this dot price. Okay, and then let's space it out so that it all, description seems to be the longest one, so we're just going to do one of these so it kind of prints out everything we want here in a line, and then we're just going to copy this just to make it look nice. So that's going to be our book model. Okay, we're going to put that in the book. And whatever the book's name, author, published, and set, and so on, we're going to be able to do a toString now and output a book when we get them. Okay, so far so good. That's what this does. Next. Okay, so that is the book model. The book repository, right? It uses the REST service. So let's go back to the book repository. The book repository was using the static service, static data source before. And what we want to do is we want to move away from using the static data source to use the REST data source. So we're going to leave this in place. We're going to say REST data source here. So we're going to add that in. Again, this is all on the front end now. The methods are the same, right? So get books, it's all the same. That's really not going to change much. We're data mapping, filtering, and we're using the index of that particular book, and we're sorting it. That's what the constructor does. And then we're going to do the same thing on the getBooks function. GetBooks looks pretty good. By author, by product, by the book, by authors, and we don't have a save book yet. although we will have a save book function that's in here, right? Because we don't have an add or an update or anything like that. We will eventually. We'll be able to update and delete and all that stuff. For now, though, we don't have the ability for us to do this. We just want to use the REST data source for this. So again, not much has changed. So far, so good. We're going to go back to the front end. And if I click books, you can see now we're getting nothing, which is now we're getting a bit of an error. It says, hey, we're getting an error. It says that error uncaught null injector, R3 injector error, book repository, REST data source. It says that the no provider for the REST data source. That's what the error is. No provider for the REST data source. So we're going to go back to this. And even though we got our REST data source here, that's happening inside of our book repository, we need to change this so that our model module, right, uses the REST data source. So our model module, which is here, we have a REST data source that's incoming. This looks pretty good actually for me. And we have our imports, our HTTP client module, and our book repository, static data source, order repository. And here we have our static data source and are using use class is the REST data source. But what we need to put in here is the also provider is the REST data source, something that we're going to put in there. So that takes care of that. And if I go back to this and press books, now we get the same error we did before. I wanted to get to that point because, again, we're just having this access control issue, which is one step at a time. We're just switching data sources to the REST data source, the back end that we talked about before. Okay, so this is the, it says Angular is running in development mode, call enable production mode to change this thing, but the biggest problem is this, because if I go back to locals 3500, we're getting our data, but because it's cross-origin, Angular is rejecting it and saying, no, I don't like this. I don't like it at all, you know, kind of thing. And that's why it's happening. We haven't changed our headers yet. We will. One thing at a time. All right, so that is our model module. We changed our model module to be more compatible with the REST data source. That's what we did here. And we're going to add the auth service eventually as well in here. But that's kind of the thing we want to do right there. All right, now the store. So in the store module, right, bookstore module, let's just check to see we have everything in here. So we have our ng module, browser module, our forms module, the models module, the bookstore component, the counter directive, the cart summary, which we have as well, which we moved, cart detail, checkout component, and the router module. These are all good things. Notice that there isn't anything in here that is preventing us from connecting. Okay, so that's number one. And then I'm just checking to see if we've got everything else going on. We have our guard, which is our store first guard. And I want to just check that to make sure that the guard is good to go. Bookstore component, we're just checking through this to make sure that navigation is good and so on. That's just the first guard. And in our router, the routing component, which is our app routing module, okay? And we're going to see that in its own module, app routing module, this one. So this is some module where we can activate and so on. Now, in the book, we included the route, the app routing module is inside of the app module. but it really is the same. There isn't anything else that we're doing here that is changing anything or adding protection or protecting anything at all. So that's what's happening there. So we're still pretty good in terms of the things that we've got going on. I think so. We've taken care of everything we can take care of on the front end. The front end seems to be working okay. Now let's cross-check the back end to make sure that we didn't miss anything, because we need to send off these special headers that we're missing. And without the special headers, the front end is going to continue to complain, and we don't want the front end to complain, or else it'll never accept our data, which is what we want to do. We want the front end to say, hey, there's data coming in and it's going to be okay. All right, so let's go to the back end now. We've just done our changes to the front end again, and we're going to hop back to the back end to make sure that there's no issues there. So here's app.js. We're going to go through it one more time. I thought I had gone through this, but so here's cores, right? So core says, hey, require cores, but it's grayed out. And this is a good indicator that somewhere we missed adding in the cores thing here. We're going to scroll down, and where we use underneath our static routing over here, the one thing we missed is app use cores. So this is just to show you this. App use cross origin service, right? This will enable cores to work, right? And what cores does is it'll set up the headers properly on the front end, okay? And if we refresh now, we're good. Look at that. That's coming off of our back end, right? That's not coming off of the cheap data that we've got going on. And to test this, let's add another book, another sci-fi book, and from the same author, let's say from a Frank Herbert or something like that, so we can see that there's more than one. Right now there's only one, but let's test it to add another one on the back end. So again, what I'm going to do is, on the back end, I'm going to add a new book. So I'm going to say db.books.insert, and again, the name of the book is the first one, so name is equal to, and I'm just going to use a book that I'm familiar with. We're going to use the book from, again, I'm thinking Frank Herbert. We're going to make another Dune book. So the Dune, we'll say, and let's bring this in so you can see the Dune series here. So here's a bunch of books from Frank Herbert and the Dune series. There's more than one book here. We can see that the second book, I think, is called The Children of Dune, right? So we have some films and so on, and this is not what I'm looking for, but I think it's called The Children of Dune. So Children of Dune, there we go. And The Children of Dune, the book, not the movie. The movie was weird, but is what we want. Okay, so that's what I'm going to be putting in, Children of Dune. So let's add that into the back end. So we're going to say the name is Children of Dune. We're going to add this to the MongoDB Atlas later on, okay? Just so we have the same data. The name is Children of Dune. The next is, if we follow the author, right, is again Frank Herbert. The description, the published, year published, by the way, it doesn't matter the order, but we're going to do this probably, is 1976. And the description, which is a short description, is, just to make sure we have enough room here. The description is going to be, I'm just going to copy paste. we're going to say that at the end of the Dune of, oh, actually, this is the third book. So this is not the second book. This is like the third book, Children of Dune. I'll be okay. See, it's been so long. And voila, doesn't matter. So this is the end. At the end of the Dune Messiah, Paul Atreides, blah blah, walks in the desert, whatever. And then we're going to have the price, and we're going to make a price which is going to be a number. We'll say it's $29.98. Now let's see if I've got all the piece parts before I press enter. So let's do this. So again, to verify, what I want to do whenever I add a new piece of data is take a look at the model. So I want to go to the model, and I want to look at the book model, and you can see that a name, author, published, description, and price is what I'm looking for. That these have to match. Name, author, published, description, and price have to be lowercase, which is what I've got here. So name, author, published, description, and price. And now I should be able to enter it, and it should give us an extra piece of data. And if I refresh, we should see an extra piece in here for Frank Herbert, Dune, and Children of Dune, and a different price. This is important because it's an important distinction, because if I go to all authors, and if I refresh now, we see that there is another book here, Children of Dune. One thing that I wouldn't mind is, and the one thing that this doesn't show, is the category or the author that's in here. It's not showing us that. It'd be nice in our book list on the front end. This is just cosmetic, that we would see the author, so we can see all the books from Frank Herbert. We can see maybe other books from Greg Bear as Asimov. Let's add in one additional book, and then because I know this takes time, so bear with me, please. I want to do db.books.insert, and we'll add in another book from another author, right? So the name is going to be, again, we'll maybe add another Larry Niven book. So Larry Niven. So he made Ringworld, but he also made some other great books too. And he did this whole Children of Ringworld, Lucifer's Hammer, and a bunch of other books. But he's got some fantastic books as well. So one of them is like Tales of Known Space, which is pretty cool, which is kind of a anthology series, right? Which is kind of cool. But let's use another popular book of his from the Ringworld series, the Ringworld Engineers, which happened as to be the second book in the series. So again, the name is the Ringworld Engineers, and just for you guys to know, the Ringworld again inspired Halo, the video game. The author is Larry Niven, and it was published way back in 1980. So a few years later. And the description is a couple of things here where we just, I want to make sure I get everything here so that way it doesn't, I'll grab this part and do this. And that's the description, and followed by the price. Which is going to be like $17.98. Just making it up here. but something different than what we had, right? There we go. So now, if I go here and refresh, we're going to have another book by Larry Niven. We're going to have two books, Ring World and Ring World Engineers, and it looks pretty nice, right? So we can see that the front end, which is Angular, is consuming the back end, which is Express. So we've done what we said we're going to do. We've connected our back end to our front end, which is what we wanted to do with this video. I think this is a great place to be. We have some additional considerations to make. And part of the considerations we have is some other things that we can't do. For example, we don't have an order. If I add this to cart, we can certainly do this. I can continue shopping. This is all good still. And if I want to add the Ring World Engineers, let's say, for example, I want to go Larry Niven, Ring World Engineers. Let's add that one too. I want all the books from Larry Niven. All right. Cool. And I want to check out. Now, watch what happens when I want to complete my order. First of all, if I complete my order now, it's going to say no. Sorry, please enter your name. This is just its own checking. And so I can go in here and say something like Tom, and my address is 1 Tom Street, and Toronto, and Ontario, and M9M 5G5, and we're going to say Canada as an example, and we're going to complete the order. But before we go there, let's take a look at, let's be prepared to look over here and see what we're going to see from a back-end perspective. Notice this is all working good. Book list is working nicely, right? And if I click complete order, well, now we're going to get a problem. It says HTTP localhost 3500 orders 404 not found, because there is no orders. We don't have an order on the back end, an order model. We don't have any of that stuff. So that's the next piece we need to take care of in the next video. The next video is we're going to shore up the orders to make sure the order model works. All right, so recap. What did we do? We've effectively converted our Express backend server to work locally with the MongoDB database, right? And again, back to that, we could easily now transfer control to the MongoDB Atlas, which we're going to do eventually, because we're going to put all of this on Heroku at the end, which is what we want to do, right? And this is all good. This is good to go. But let's take a look at what we need to do. So to do for next video, we need to make a new model, the order model. It's going to be a lot more complex than this model, because this model here for the book is pretty much, it's just got one document, which is going to be at a time. There's nothing embedded. In the new model, if you think about what we're doing, and take a look at that data we just got. So in the data here, even though there's an error, it says, hey, there's an error, I don't know what you're talking about, but we have this. We have all this data, and notice that there is a cart with an embedded lines. Lines is actually a subdocument with another array of books. Like there's several, documents deep here in order for us to create this cart, the shopping cart experience. We have to create a couple things. Cart, we have to create the lines, we have to create our order model. There's a lot of stuff to do to make this work properly so that it adds an order to the back end. And my friends, once we add an order to the back end, we can modify the order, we can do all that stuff next week. Right, for now, we want to do this in the next video. So I'll see you in the next video.